We have a new Chronicles book, a patch in the near horizon, and a Q&A that kind of sucked. Hey, it's Soul, bringing you the World of Warcraft. It's St. Patrick's Day, which means it is March 17th, 2017. This is Warcraft Weekly, and I'm just going to smash some news together for you. And I'm going to ask all of you, the folks at home, how was your week? Anything cool happen to you folks? Did you get a Legendary? Did someone else get a Legendary? Someone who you don't like and you're like, fuck that guy, they don't deserve any of that shit. Any new bosses that you killed or any like super epic or tragic stories that you have to tell? Share them in the comment below, I'd love to read them. Quick recap, I did a Legion review of the kind of first 6 months of Legion. I went over a good chunk of all the features without getting too in depth, and basically I told people, or I'm telling you guys, I like the game. I think it has a lot of flaws, but I think that people who haven't picked it up yet should give it a try if it happens to be on sale somewhere, or if you've got a friend, a very rich friend that has a lot of BattleNet balance. Hey, hint hint, I do encourage people to give it a try, see for themselves what they think of the expansion and all these things that the forums are talking about. I also talked about my experiences as a guild leader of a guild that has lasted for nearly 10 years. I've talked about my best practices to help the guild just kind of keep chugging along for as long as it has been. So far, it looks like it's been pretty well received, even by the people at Reddit who don't like anything else that I do, apparently, but that's okay. If you're interested in managing a guild, or if you just want to help your current guild, if you want to help their leadership do a little bit better, there might be a couple things in there that'll be useful. So the dates for Blizzcon 2017 have been announced. It's going to go down November 3rd and 4th, as usual at the Anaheim Convention Center. Funny enough, the hotels right next to it are already booked, so if you're interested in going, good luck. If you're interested in at least watching it, you can always get the virtual ticket, and just as I'm sure, just as in previous years, you can pick up the swag bag that will come with it if you pay like I think another like $40 or so. If you're not interested in that either, of course, Wowhead and mmo-champion and those likes, heck, I'm probably going to do a recap when that's... You know what? All that stuff is like so far away. Why the fuck am I talking about this shit still? Chronicles Volume 2 is out, and on one hand, it is a really fun read. It's really cool that they tie so much of the story together, just like they did in Chronicles Volume 1. They made it pretty interesting. They made it all, for the most part, make sense. It answers lots of questions and fills up holes that were sort of left when you're kind of wondering, oh, so how did, what are all those ghosts doing in Karazhan? Where exactly did they come from? So they answer questions like those. As a whole, it covers the history of Draenor, which may or may not sound very interesting to you, but it does have a very good tie-in with the rest of the story. Beyond Draenor and like the origin of like the whole Rise of the Horde and things like that, it segues into both the first and the second war. And that covers both the first and the second Warcraft games, including the Dark Portal. That's the expansion of Warcraft 2. On the other hand, if you're a lore buff or like super expert on Warcraft lore, this is a book of nightmares, and you're going to drive yourself crazy with all the retcons. Like I said, they explain like what went on in Karazhan, but at the same time, well, before Karazhan used to be like this because Medivh, the master of that tower, he used to act a certain way, but now he's acting this way according to Chronicles, and now this is the established lore. So, well, that's just one example. There are a lot of things. There are a lot of like minute changes, like why do the broken look like the broken? As opposed to like the Draenei, how come they look okay but the broken are not? What was the influence there? But all in all, though, it is, this is now the Warcraft Bible. This is the thing to follow when it comes to established lore. This is what the future games and future stories of Warcraft are going to be based on. This is the new foundation. I think I just said the same thing 4 times. Just take a look at it, or if anything, just wait for some of the more in-depth reviews, but not by me. There are many more and much more qualified YouTubers and analysts out there that will be more than happy to break this down for you, if they haven't already from the spoilers. 2 quick PSAs for you. The Ungoro Madness event had just started just the other day, and it's going to extend throughout this weekend. Basically, just go to Ungoro Crater, find dinosaurs, kill them, loot a thing, and well, stuff happens. I know it doesn't sound all that interesting, but hey, it's a micro event. It's just a small little thing. I'd say go down there. I'm sure a lot of players are going to go down there too, especially if you're on a PvP server. It might be a total gank fest. I say see if you can take advantage of that. The For Azeroth promotion, which is the thing to get you that fiery saber mount guy, they extended this all the way up to March 26. So say what you want. Maybe they're looking for more numbers to get into Heroes of the Storm games. You know, maybe the promotion just isn't as successful as they like at the moment, but gives a shit. You still have a chance to get the mount. Go ahead and do it. Doesn't take long. Heck, if I don't know if it'll help at all, but if you wanted to like put your battle tag down below, see if anyone there might want to hook up, and you can get some games together. If you guys can make that happen, that would be awesome. But it's a cool and decent looking mount, so hey, a short cross promotion only takes a couple of hours. I say it's worth it. A new PTR build was deployed, and there are two themes to this one: legendaries and professions. And by professions, I basically mean alchemy. Turns out that the reagent requirements for most of the potions, like the good potions, like the Deadly Grays and the Old War, the requirement or material cost for that's gone down by half, which is pretty darn sweet. I know that there are a lot of concerns from mostly herbalists who are looking to get like the rank 3s, you know, or alchemists too. You know, they want to get the rank 2s and rank 3s so they can get more for their money. In my opinion, there's also a kind of supply issue that's a concern. I mean, flasks are, you know, those have pretty high reagent requirements still. So I guess as a trade-off, they just wanted to make potions a little bit more accessible. My advice to you, and especially to the gold makers, try to get rid of your bulk stock like now, as soon as you can, at as a reasonable price as you can afford. And the same thing with the herbalist. Just try to get rid of your bulk stock, and for both of you, just sell as you go, or just make as you go, so that way you're not wasting resources for when the patch finally does deploy. And that's going to be pretty darn soon by all indications. Now as for legendaries, there were a lot of changes to legendaries, and I'm not going to go through all of them because a lot of them got changed, and a lot of them are probably going to change some more, maybe in another build. The idea behind this revamp, though, is that Blizzard wanted to push further into their approach of trying to make utility legendaries have a little bit more bite to them, and at the same time take a little bit of the bite away from the throughput legendaries. This is supposed to be an effort to make legendaries feel a little bit more situational, mostly with regards to the DPS ones. They still want to make them good, but they don't want to make them good in the sense that they're good in every situation. The end game for legendaries, or at least my feelings behind it, are that, you know, in the end they want players to be able to swap out these different cool pieces of equipment so they can fit whatever situation, kind of similar to talents or glyphs. Why did they remove glyphs? Like, we wouldn't be in this situation if they just left major glyphs intact. Like, ta-da! Now everyone has legendaries, you know, just like they did before. And ultimately, that's why I do not like legendaries. It's not because the drop rate's so dumb, or I need it for, you know, I'm not viable without it. That's not something I entirely agree with. For me, it's more fundamental. It's basically this is a system of glyphs. It's just that instead of glyphs, it's a gear, and you're swapping these things out. But the difference between glyphs and legendaries is that a glyph you can just buy off the auction house, and a legendary, you just gotta hope that you can get it. I mean, imagine all the gold that I'd make. But anyway, legendaries did have a lot of changes. They got kind of nerfed, they got kind of buffed. I'm gonna link all that stuff below, and I'm curious, you know, what's your favorite? And I'm curious to see how this has affected you, if at all. I noticed that the legendary legs for protection paladins, the one that gives you, you know, the shield event makes your Avenger shield hit 5 targets instead of 3. I get some more bonus damage out of that. I didn't ask for it. I don't think I need it, but I'll take it. So the Matt Goss and Josh Allen Q&A that went on just the other day, like I said, it kind of sucked, and I don't blame Matt Goss for it. I think that he effectively answered questions to, you know, the best of the ability as an SME or a subject matter expert, but the questions, they kind of sucked. I think part of it was because the premise of the Q&A, which was all about itemization, a lot of that's already been addressed in like 715 and in a lot of follow-up blue posts and other blogs, and Ian talking about this, or someone talking about that on Twitter, or a game designer talking about this. And it's funny because people are saying, oh, the community, the Blizzard team doesn't talk to anybody, you know, we don't hear feedback and blah blah blah. But at the same time, the Q&A felt kind of weak because we're answering questions that have already been addressed. And I didn't put the Q&A thread under a magnifying glass, but I looked at some of the upvoted comments, or you know, the upvoted questions, and they looked like shit that we already know, or things that have already been addressed, or just kind of like the same broken record that Blizzard has made a statement on previously. It's just people are just clamoring to get that answer again because they didn't get an answer that they liked. That's okay, but without actual context, and unfortunately the weakness of this these Q&As is that the questions have to be pretty brief. There's only so much that we can get out of it. On the other hand, next week's Q&A, and you know, on a side comment, I really like that they're doing a Q&A like pretty much every week. Yeah, as tiring as I'm sure that is for these design leads, I do think it's really cool. Anyway, next week's Q&A is going to be all about content, so it's going to be pretty specific, probably on 7.2. A lot of questions are going to be centered around that, you know, things like Sentinex farming, or I'm sorry, Nether Shard farming, and like the Broken Shore stuff, and this whole building thing, which to be honest doesn't excite me very much. And I'll do an actual impressions video of 7.2 in the very near future, hopefully before the patch comes out. But I'm sure, or at least I'm hoping, that that's going to be a much more useful Q&A based on questions that are asked that don't involve stuff that we've just seen in patch previews, for example. Anyway, Matt Goss interview, there were a couple things that I extracted from it, so I'll share them with you right now. One of the most popular dead horses to be beat was the idea of bringing back reforging. Matt gave some good reasons why, again, they didn't want reforging to come back into the game, because they didn't want to kind of they didn't want to complicate things even more than it sort of already is. Funny enough, it was Lore and not Matt that mentioned something about reforging that I agree with, that the purpose of reforging was to remove stats that were literally useless, as in if you're beyond the hit and expertise cap, those extra stats, they're not going to do shit for you, so of course you're going to want to reallocate those into something else. I'm not familiar with all 30 something specs, so correct me if I'm wrong, that's okay, but the way I see it, regarding the stats that we have now in Legion, there are no stats that have a negative value if you have a certain amount. Of course, there's an unoptimal measurement to consider, but it's not like how hit and expertise were. Instead, Matt focused on what he called player agency, or otherwise the ability for players to have the control over customization, for example, through reforging, or gems, or enchants, or talents, or glyphs, or things like that. Personally, I think gems and enchants are the solution. I think that there should be much more enchants and gems and gem slots that should be brought back into the game. Because if you do want to facilitate or otherwise encourage that sort of player agency, or the ability to customize yourself, I think the best and most elegant solution for that is to not only empower the players, but introduce a way to bring interplayer commerce into the mix. I think that would be a very healthy thing. Matt did bring up the old argument of having to go back to town and having to reforge, or to pop your reforge amount and do all that stuff, and I still agree with that, because that's something that individual player is doing on their own. Yeah, they have more control, but they're doing it by themselves. Again, bringing other players into the mix by possibly purchasing or helping trade and do things like that in order to get another gem or another enchant or something like that, I think that helps. He talked a little bit about the swapping out of relics, which you can't do because when you replace a relic, it's destroyed. He did make a good point on the fact that swapping out a relic, like let's say they were swappable out, like as if it was an equipment slot, that doing so would do kind of weird things when it comes to, hey, you know, we're on this boss, so now I'm going to change my talent loadout, I'm going to swap my relics, and maybe some of my gear, and that's a bit unelegant. I think that the relic system itself would have to go through like a pretty big revamp if they wanted to make it a system where you can swap things out, but do it cleanly so that you don't cause like big delays when you want to get into certain kinds of gameplay. It's like, oh, I'm doing PvP, let me swap out world PvP, I'm sorry, let me swap out my relics so I can be viable, or I'm doing this certain boss so I'm doing it. And when you're doing it so much, you know, you want to try to limit that sort of downtime. The reason why I'm even mentioning this is because once again, it's like, well, we used to be able to swap glyphs out just fine. Matt said that they look at trinkets a lot because of the whole Titan forging thing and the fact that a dungeon trinket that happens to Titan forge into a 925 or whatever the hell that's going to be, how that needs to keep measuring up against like a mythic gear. So Blizzard chose this burden. They knew that Titan forging was going to cause the possibility of a normal dungeon trinket equating to a mythic raid trinket. And that's okay, I mean, they can do whatever they want, right? But it feels like Blizzard shares the same fears that players have with regards to, I'm a mythic raider and I'm never going to replace this trinket that I got like however many months ago because it's still better. So it gives me the pressure that Blizzard is finally feeling the weight of what Titan forging means, not just from a player standpoint, but now from a developer standpoint. It's like, oh shit, now we have to balance all these things. Should we still respect the fact that mythic raiding is like the pinnacle of like the best gear that you can get? Or should we just kind of be like, okay, yeah, in order to get the best trinket ever, like it's going to come from Neltharion Slayer, so mythic raiders who want to be the most viable or the most optimal are going to be farming that day in and day out. I don't know. Even if that's not going to be the reality for the vast majority of players, the possibility creates this perception, and this perception influences players of all skill levels and player types. I strongly believe that if they did a sort of stealth nerf on Titan forging by the time the Tomb of Sargeras open, as in like the Tomb of Sargeras opens, the item level cap of everything just kind of goes up, but the maximum Titanforge level, it's maybe like 10 or 20 item levels under what you would get from like mythic stuff. Oh, and high-end keystone dungeons too, like that would be okay. But for like any other source, like the whole farm normal mythic dungeons or +5s or LFR or whatever, like it would only Titanforge like only up to a certain point. I think nobody would notice. And I think that would work. Lucky players can still feel lucky knowing that they got like a really, really good item from a normal dungeon or an emissary chest or what have you. At the same time, mythic raiders and high-level keystone dungeon runners who might be, one and the same, they're still going to feel good because at the end of the week, when they open up their chest or when they kill that next mythic raid boss, they know that they're still getting like an upgrade of what they were doing previously. At the moment, it's possible, even if it's a really small chance, it is possible to obtain mythic level gear without doing mythic level content. And while again, the possibility of that is very small, the perception of that is a pretty big problem for players these days. With regards to that, Matt Goss did say that there's going to be a small patch just before the Tomb of Sargeras opens. Woohoo! So we may see a 7.25 patch in the future where we'll see things that address like Titan forging or certain kinds of itemization that players have had very earnest questions about. The last thing that he talked about was about artifact challenges, and he said that they're going to be brutal, and I can't wait. I don't know if it's on the PTR. I don't want to spoil myself. That's one thing that I don't want to try because I really want to feel that accolade of earning that Protection Paladin flail weapon that we saw at BlizzCon and in some pictures many moons ago. So I'm really excited about that. I'm going to try to provide a link below to all the different kinds of new artifact skins that are going to come out from these artifact challenges. And hey, let me know, try to find your favorite one or one that's for your class and spec. And hey, let me know if that's something that interests you. I think it's really cool that there's going to be like a really hard, very class and role specific quest to challenge me as a player and make me feel good if I happen to get it on like the first day, which I doubt, but we'll see. Anyway, that's the news, and like I said, leave a comment below. Tell me how your week was. Tell me if there was a cool thing or a really shitty thing that happened to you this week. Like and sub to support this channel because those are the things that help keep the lights on. You guys have a good weekend, and I'm Soul. Stay breezy, guys.